When you think of this idea or the words indie or new media, what do you think of? What things come to mind when you hear that?
Well, as far as independent press goes,
Sure.
that's one thing that comes to mind, which is, you're not talking about your major publications that have huge corporations that back them or anything like that. You're talking about smaller, more locally centric things that are targeted to a more specific crowd or community that tends to focus a little bit more specifically on issues that are relevant or off the beaten path in that way. And that's what I think of in terms of independent press,
Okay.
And obviously there's a big tie-in now to the whole social media as well, which, is an entirely different aspect of it, which is really helpful for independent press and for alternative outlets because it really is about democratizing information, that a lot of people then get to present what it is that's interesting and going on. And then, there's sort of an interplay now between the independent print or the independent media outlets and then social media, which directly connects to the people who are talking about it. So that's a lot of what I think of anyway.
New media. New media for me, I guess, media is always changing. So to say new media is just kind of what's new now, and it'll be new later. And the newspaper was new at one point. But I think what people really mean when they say that is the internet-based media and how the internet has shifted. And in my opinion, the internet's the biggest shift for communication and media since the printing press. So I think that's what people are talking about. It's that shift to democratizing the message and how people are communicating, because what the internet's doing is really taking a hit to TV, newspapers, magazines, everything. Everything has to change because of what the internet is able to do.
There's a wide spectrum of independent film. The studios consider anything that's made for less than $20 million to be independent. But the strict definition has really been that it's made outside of the studio system. However, there are, and we're really fortunate that, that some studios like Fox Searchlight, which is the art division of Fox, or Paramount Vantage, which actually just folded, but and a couple of other ones have folded, but like there's Sony Pictures Classics. They both acquire independent films that are either made in other countries, so they've already been purchased, and they've already been created, in the mind of the director. And sometimes they'll produce stuff, and so every once in a while, like right now we're playing Jane Eyre, which is actually technically a studio picture, but it's kind of going to the art market because it's considered to be an art film, and it really does have. For me, it's really about the fact that the vision of the director is the bottom line of the film, that the director's artistic vision is being realized, and that there's not a bunch of people in a boardroom being like, okay, how are we gonna make money off of this? It's got to be Brad Pitt plus Tom Cruise or whatever it is, so equals dollars. So I think it's changing all the time, but it's pretty interesting what we can define as independent and artistically interesting too.
In music, there's 4 major record labels in the U.S., and a lot of those have sub-labels that operate underneath them and share staffs and things like that. Independent record labels like Saddle Creek, we operate entirely outside of that. We don't fall under any of those labels' umbrellas. And doing so, you have to operate in a totally different way than they do. There's a lot more money behind each of their releases. A lot more marketing goes into each of their releases. They have bigger staffs, more infrastructure. So independent labels just have to kind of scrape at it in their own way, carve out their little niche, and I think that's the biggest difference is you can operate in kind of a niche way where you don't have to worry about selling 1 million records because you've spent X amount of dollars on marketing and putting out this release. You can target your releases to a more specific audience and just put more personal care into it, I guess.
One question that I was kind of thinking about as you were all talking was, this probably relates more with the ideas of social media and movies, but if you got an idea, please jump in. How have things like Netflix, blockbuster streaming, those things helped or hurt the movie industry in general, and in particular, independent movie industry?
Well, I mean,
I'm sure, I know, I'm really curious to your response because we might have two different responses to this.
Yeah. Well, I hate hearing about people downloading movies and streaming them illegally. I hate that. But I also I believe strongly in the theater atmosphere and in in having the opportunity to see a film like the way that the director intends it to be seen, which is usually in a theater with an audience with the surround sound on the big screen. And so, I'm a real champion of that. And, so I really feel like, streaming it this big, it's just you're not getting the experience that was intended for any movie. And there was just yesterday, there was a big article where James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow, did you see this?
I did.
And a bunch of directors came out against the studios putting stuff out on VOD 60 days after a film's released in the theater, because they particularly, they're still making money off of that. It's not a dollars and cents issue. It's an issue of their artistic vision being realized the way that they want it to be, which is that community experience of seeing something in the theater. So, and then just generally, I think we're at a really interesting time right now. Last night, I was just telling CJ, I watched this documentary called Page One about the New York Times. It's phenomenal. We'll probably be playing it later this summer. And, and it's about their transition to new media and everything like that. And they're having such issues coming up with, how their business plan can function when everything is going to be accessed online. I feel like right now we're in this golden age of freedom of information and access to the arts in every way we can, and it's all free, which is awesome. But the flip side of that is that the artists and the businesses that are so well-intentioned that are trying to make these things happen are not able to, have any kind of income, so they're not able to make a living off their work. And so, we're going to see a lot of stuff topple down, and then we're going to see everything get commodified. I think in about 5 years, we're going to be paying for 90%. They're going to figure out how to regulate all those sites that you're downloading the free movies off and downloading the free music off. And I think it's changing drastically right now. But I also feel like there's this utopia thing going on right now that we should take advantage of in a way.
Well, you see, and I agree in principle, especially with the going to see a movie in the theater if possible. But a lot of times the reality of the space, take Omaha for example, you guys have 2 screens, and you guys play the best movies in town, you really do as far as independent things and stuff like that, but it's 2 screens, which means there's a ton of stuff that's just never going to come here, And so for me, part of what I've enjoyed is the fact that a place like Video on Demand or a place like Netflix, for the smaller movies that aren't ever going to be able to play in a market that, that I can even go out and see them in, I get to see them and relatively quickly.
Yeah.
For example, this week, we're going to take a look at James Gunn's Super, which Rainn Wilson is in and everything. It's like a weird indie crazy superhero type movie, but that was put on demand like a week after it was released in the theater. And so it's a chance for me to see a movie that I know is never going to come here. And so that part of it I think is good. And I agree with you that there has to be a way to commodify it, at least some way, or the artists are going to dry up. I think that's very true, because there has to be a way to survive. I do think that the level of exposure that you're able to get sometimes from being able to put it on things that are streaming that are reputable services, not ripping stuff, but, the Netflix, the video on demand, those sorts of things, I do feel like it gives the artist a chance to have their work seen and thus be funded and and do those other things as well. But I think that the key is going to be the interplay between the places like the Cox and the things like that, making deals that make sense with smaller groups so that we can have a way to get to them that isn't this terrible commodification. Because if it does happen where we have to pay for every little thing like that, then then I think it's going to have a terrible backlash as far as creating art, you know?
Yeah,